The first time I met Jake Collins, I was captivated by the ease of his smile and the confidence that seemed to radiate from him without effort. It was a summer evening in Seattle, the kind where the sun lingers just long enough to paint the sky in soft pastels, and everything feels full of possibility. I was 28 then, fresh into my role as a marketing executive at a budding tech startup, eager to make my mark. Jake was introduced to me through a mutual friend at a networking event, and from that moment, the two of us seemed to orbit the same space effortlessly. Jake, 30 at the time, was an entrepreneur with a small but promising company in the digital media space. There was something magnetic about him, a mix of ambition and charm that made you want to believe in his vision, in the future he was building. Our conversations stretched late into the night, filled with laughter and shared dreams. He listened intently as I spoke about my goals, the campaigns I was leading, and the milestones I hoped to reach. It felt like someone was rooting for me, and that feeling was intoxicating. As our relationship blossomed over the next few months, I found myself thriving not only personally but professionally. Jake's support was unwavering, or so I thought. He celebrated my promotions and cheered me on as I took on bigger projects. When I landed a major client that put my company on the map, Jake was the first to raise a glass in my honor. He made me believe that my success was his success too, and in many ways, I was right. For a while, it seemed that we were a team, partners in every sense. But beneath the surface, subtle shifts began to creep in, like cracks forming in a once solid foundation. At first, it was little things I barely noticed. A sideways glance when I mentioned a late meeting, a tightening of his jaw whenever I talked about my upcoming presentations, or the way he would occasionally change the subject when I shared news of a new award I was nominated for. These moments were fleeting, easily dismissed as normal husbandly concern, or perhaps the stress of his own business. I brushed off the unease, telling myself that Jake's jealousy was just a sign of how much he cared. After all, who wouldn't feel a little threatened when their partner was climbing the ladder so rapidly? I convinced myself that his occasional need for reassurance was harmless, even endearing. But as the months turned into years, those small signs grew more frequent and harder to ignore. Jake's demeanor shifted from supportive partner to something more controlling, more possessive. He started questioning my decisions, not just at work but in everyday life. "Are you sure you need to attend that conference?" he asked one evening, his tone laced with something I couldn't quite place. "You've been spending a lot of time there lately." Another time, he suggested I should consider scaling back my hours so we could focus on us, framing it as concern for our relationship, but feeling more like an attempt to tether me. At first, I believed his worries stemmed from love, from a genuine desire to protect what we had built. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. I began to notice how he subtly undermined my confidence, making offhand comments about how demanding my job was, or how little time I spent at home. I caught him rolling his eyes when I spoke about my latest project, and once, I overheard him bad-mouthing my professional contacts during a dinner with his friends. It was confusing. Jake was still the man I had fallen for, but shadowed now by a darker, more insecure version. I wondered if I was imagining things, if the stress of my workload was making me paranoid. I told myself that every couple faces rough patches, that this was just a phase we'd get through together. But the truth was harder to face. Jake's jealousy wasn't just a fleeting emotion. It was beginning to shape his actions, and, by extension, my life. Despite this, I pushed on, determined not to let the changes in our relationship derail my ambitions. I threw myself into my work, channeling the unease into late nights and early mornings, hoping that success would somehow smooth over the cracks forming at home. When I landed a promotion to lead the marketing department, I expected Jake to be proud. Instead, his congratulations felt hollow, his smile forced. "Just don't let this job consume you," he warned, his eyes dark with unspoken concerns. Looking back now, those warnings were signs of a deeper tension, a friction that was building beneath the surface. Jake's insecurity about my career was no longer subtle. It was becoming an obstacle. Our conversations, once full of encouragement and mutual dreams, turned into battles of wills. He questioned my choices, doubted my judgment, and sometimes I felt like I was walking on eggshells just to avoid triggering his jealousy. At work, I was gaining momentum, but at home, the distance between us grew. Jake started spending more time at his office, sometimes working late, sometimes disappearing for days under the guise of business trips. When he was home, our interactions felt strained. Conversations clipped and guarded. The man who once championed my success now seemed overwhelmed by it, unable to reconcile his own ambitions with mine. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner where Jake criticized a campaign I had spent weeks perfecting, I found myself questioning everything. Was this the partnership I had envisioned? Was this the man I wanted to share my life with? His jealousy, once a minor annoyance, was now casting a long shadow over my happiness and my career. Yet I was still holding on to the hope that things would get better, that the man I loved was still there beneath the insecurities. Seattle's rainy nights became a backdrop to my restless thoughts. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations and wondering where the man I married had gone. The contrast between the man who had celebrated my victories and the one who now resented them was stark and painful. I felt torn between my love for Jake and my drive to succeed, caught in a silent war between ambition and affection. Despite the growing tension, I told myself that love was worth fighting for. I believed that with patience and understanding, Jake's jealousy could be managed, perhaps even overcome. I wasn't ready to admit that this was the beginning of a struggle that would test every part of me: my career, my self-worth, and the very foundation of our marriage. But the signs were there, unmistakable and persistent. Jake's jealousy was no longer just a feeling. It was becoming a force that threatened to undermine everything I had worked so hard to achieve. And I knew, deep down, that the path ahead would require more than just hope. It would require courage and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. For now, though, I was still caught in the early chapters of our story, holding on to the memories of the man who once believed in me without reservation, even as the man before me began to change. The tension simmered beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged, and I found myself bracing for the moment when the fragile balance between love and ambition would finally tip. I never imagined that the man who once stood beside me, cheering me on, would become the source of the very obstacles I was trying to overcome. It started with a sinking feeling, a whisper of doubt that I tried to silence. But then the pieces began to fall into place, revealing a reality I wasn't prepared to face. Jake was actively sabotaging my career. It began subtly. A missed call from my boss Claire during a crucial project, followed by a vague comment about a rumor circulating in the office. At first, I dismissed it as office gossip, something that happens in every workplace. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more pointed. My reputation, carefully built over years of dedication and late nights, was suddenly under attack. One afternoon, after a particularly frustrating meeting where I was blindsided by questions about my professionalism, I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to Claire, my company's HR director, hoping for clarity. Our conversation was cautious at first, but soon Claire shared something that chilled me. Someone had been contacting her repeatedly with complaints about me, complaints that were baseless, malicious, and clearly intended to damage my standing at work. The shock hit me like a wave. Who would do this? I thought of colleagues, competitors, even clients. But then the pieces clicked. The timing, the nature of the complaints, it all pointed to Jake. The man who once celebrated my victories was now undermining them, using underhanded tactics to hold me back. Confronting that truth was harder than I expected. I arranged to meet Jake at our favorite cafe, the place where so many of our plans and dreams had been forged. I laid it out plainly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Jake, I know you've been contacting Claire, making false complaints about me. Why would you do this? He looked at me, eyes shadowed with guilt and something else, defensiveness, maybe even fear. You don't understand, he said, voice low. You're so wrapped up in your career you don't see what it's doing to us. I'm just trying to get you to focus on what matters." I felt a surge of disbelief. Was this really the man I loved, twisting truth to justify his jealousy? When I pressed him further, his denial was swift and cold. He accused me of being paranoid, of imagining things because I was under too much pressure. "Maybe you should take a step back and think about what you're doing," he said, as if my success was a problem to be solved. His words stung, but they also steeled my resolve. I realized then that I couldn't let Jake's sabotage define my future. If anything, this was a moment to fight back, not with anger, but with facts and proof. I needed to protect my career, my reputation, and ultimately, myself. I began to document everything: emails, phone records, messages, every interaction that hinted at Jake's interference. It was painstaking work, collecting evidence that could stand up to scrutiny. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I was doing it to reclaim control over my life and career. I refused to be a victim of someone else's insecurities and fears. Seeking support was the next step. I reached out to Claire again, sharing the evidence I had gathered. She listened, her expression a mix of concern and admiration for my courage. "Mia, this is serious," she said, "but you're handling it with professionalism. We'll make sure your work environment is protected." Together, we discussed strategies to expose the sabotage without creating a hostile workplace. Claire assured me that the company valued integrity and would not tolerate harassment or interference, especially from outside sources. Having an ally within the company gave me a glimmer of hope amidst the turmoil. The confrontation with Jake was inevitable. When I brought the evidence to him, expecting remorse or at least an explanation, I was met with anger and disbelief. He doubled down on his accusations, blaming me for being too focused on work and neglecting our relationship. "You think you're better than me now," he spat, "but all this success is making you blind." His words were designed to wound, to undermine my confidence. But instead, they reinforced my determination. I told him firmly that his actions were unacceptable and that I was prepared to take whatever steps necessary to protect my career. For the first time, I saw the chasm between us widen beyond repair. In the weeks that followed, I navigated a minefield of emotions and logistics. Balancing the demands of my job with the growing personal crisis was exhausting. Yet, I refused to let the sabotage derail my progress. I leaned on friends and trusted colleagues, gathering strength from their support and encouragement. While Jake tried to gaslight me, making me question my perceptions and sanity, I held on to the truth. I knew that I wasn't imagining the interference, and that standing up for myself was not just about my career, but about reclaiming my dignity. The experience also taught me the importance of allies. Claire became more than just an HR director. She was a pillar of support and an unexpected advocate. Together, we devised plans to document Jake's interference comprehensively and present a case to senior management. It was a delicate process, requiring tact and professionalism, but I was ready. I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. The company valued fairness and integrity, and with Claire's help, I had a path forward. It was empowering to know that the truth could prevail when backed by evidence and the right support. Through it all, I learned to trust myself again. Jake's sabotage was a betrayal, not just of our marriage, but of my very sense of self. But instead of allowing it to break me, I chose to confront it head-on, armed with proof and the resilience that had carried me this far. This chapter of my life was painful, yes, but it was also a turning point. I was no longer willing to be passive in the face of undermining forces, whether at work or at home. The fight was just beginning, and I was ready to take control, to protect my career, my reputation, and ultimately, my future. When I reached out to Claire Reynolds, the HR director at my company, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew she was professional and fair, but the depth of the situation was something I hadn't fully shared yet. The moment we sat down together in her office, I laid everything on the table. The false complaints, the whispered rumors, and the mounting evidence of Jake's interference. Her expression shifted from concern to determination as I spoke, and I realized I had found an unexpected ally. Claire was more than just a gatekeeper for human resources. She was a strategist with a keen understanding of corporate dynamics. What surprised me most was when she mentioned her close professional relationship with Jake's business partner and, by extension, his boss. "This goes beyond just your company," she said quietly. "If Jake is undermining you here, it's likely affecting how he's seen in his own circles." Her words hit me hard. Jake's sabotage wasn't contained to my workplace. It was part of a larger pattern, a ripple effect that could endanger not only my career, but his reputation as well. Claire's insight gave me a new perspective. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a professional crisis that demanded a strategic response. Together, we began to devise a plan. Claire emphasized the importance of thorough documentation and careful communication. We couldn't just accuse Jake without solid evidence, and we needed to ensure that any action taken would be supported by the company's leadership. I felt a surge of relief knowing that I wasn't navigating this alone. The first step was to compile a comprehensive record of Jake's interference. Claire helped me organize emails, phone logs, and the messages I had saved. We mapped out a timeline that clearly showed how and when Jake's actions had impacted my work. This meticulous approach was exhausting, but necessary. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall of truth we were building. In parallel, Claire used her connections to discreetly gather information about Jake's standing within his own professional network. It became clear that his reputation was already under scrutiny. The rumors and complaints I faced were just the tip of the iceberg. His own business partner had begun distancing himself, wary of the potential fallout from Jake's behavior. Armed with this knowledge, we prepared to present our case to senior management. Claire coached me on how to articulate the situation with clarity and professionalism. It was difficult to remain calm when discussing the man I still cared for, but I knew that keeping my composure was essential. This wasn't just about exposing Jake. It was about protecting my career and the integrity of my workplace. The day of the meeting arrived, and I found myself standing before a panel of executives, Claire by my side. I laid out the evidence, speaking with a firmness I hadn't known I possessed. The room was silent as I detailed the false complaints Jake had made, the attempts to sabotage my projects, and the broader implications for both our companies. To my relief, the leadership responded with seriousness and concern. They assured me that the company would take appropriate action to ensure a safe and professional environment. Claire's role as an advocate was invaluable. Her support lent credibility and weight to my claims. Meanwhile, the ripple effect was already taking hold. Jake's business partner confronted him, expressing disappointment and demanding explanations. The isolation Jake began to feel was a stark contrast to the confidence he had once exuded. It was a turning point, not just for me but for him as well. Back at work, the atmosphere shifted. Colleagues who had been hesitant to take sides now openly supported me, impressed by how I handled the situation with integrity. My reputation, once under threat, was being restored. The respect I earned from leadership and peers alike strengthened my position and gave me renewed confidence. Throughout this process, I learned the power of having allies, especially unexpected ones like Claire. Her professionalism, empathy, and strategic thinking were crucial in turning the tide. I realized that no matter how isolated you might feel in a personal crisis, there are people willing to stand with you if you reach out. The experience also deepened my understanding of boundaries, between personal and professional life, between loyalty and self-preservation. Jake's actions blurred those lines, but with Claire's help, I was able to reclaim them. It was a lesson in resilience and the importance of not facing challenges alone. As Jake's world unraveled, I focused on rebuilding mine. I poured my energy into my work, channeling the turmoil into determination. The campaign I had once feared would be overshadowed by scandal became a success story, a testament to perseverance and integrity. Though the road ahead was uncertain, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was no longer just a victim of sabotage. I was an active participant in shaping my future. The partnership I once believed in had fractured, but in its place, I was forging a new path. one defined by strength, clarity, and the unwavering support of those who stood by me. This chapter marked a turning point, not just in my career but in my life. With allies like Claire and a clear strategy, I was ready to face whatever came next. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I felt in control. With Claire's unwavering support and the undeniable evidence we presented, my professional reputation began to heal in ways I hadn't dared hope for. The company's leadership not only cleared my name, but also publicly acknowledged my integrity in handling a difficult situation. I found myself invited to lead new initiatives, my expertise sought after rather than questioned. The respect I earned from senior management and colleagues alike was a balm to wounds deeper than just professional slights. It was validation that I could rise above betrayal without losing myself. Jake's world, in stark contrast, crumbled under the weight of his actions. His business partner, once loyal and trusting, chose to distance himself and demanded accountability. The ripple effects of his sabotage reached far beyond our marriage, shaking his professional relationships and casting doubt on his leadership. I learned that his boss had confronted him privately, warning that such behavior jeopardized not only Jake's reputation, but also the stability of his company. The personal toll was immense. Our marriage, already strained, could not withstand the fallout. The distance between us grew wider, filled with unspoken resentments and fractured trust. Conversations that used to flow freely became terse exchanges, each word carefully measured or withheld entirely. The man who once supported my ambitions now seemed like a stranger, burdened by the consequences of his own insecurities and choices. Despite the pain, I embraced the freedom that came with this unraveling. I no longer felt trapped by the weight of Jake's jealousy or the fear of his sabotage. Instead, I found strength in my renewed independence and the clarity that came from standing firm in my truth. I immersed myself in my work, channeling the energy that once fueled doubt into creativity and leadership. My support network expanded during this time as well. Friends, family, and colleagues rallied around me, their encouragement a steady source of comfort and motivation. I realized how vital it was to lean on others, to accept help, and to recognize that resilience is often a collective effort rather than a solitary journey. The experience reshaped my perspective on ambition and relationships. I understood now that success should never come at the cost of respect or support from those closest to you. True partnership means celebrating each other's victories, not undermining them out of insecurity or fear. This realization was painful but liberating, allowing me to set boundaries and prioritize my well-being without guilt. Professionally, the aftermath of the ordeal brought unexpected opportunities. Leadership entrusted me with greater responsibility. Impressed by my ability to navigate adversity with grace and determination, I was invited to mentor younger colleagues, sharing my story not as a cautionary tale, but as an example of perseverance and integrity in the face of challenge. At home, the dissolution of my marriage was bittersweet. While it marked the end of a chapter filled with both love and betrayal, it also opened the door to self-discovery and healing. I began to rebuild my life on my terms, creating spaces where I could thrive without compromise. Through it all, I held on to the lessons learned, the importance of trusting oneself, the power of allies, and the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. My journey was far from over, but I faced the future with a renewed sense of purpose and confidence. This chapter of my life, marked by both loss and triumph, was a testament to resilience. It showed me that even when those closest to you falter, your strength and integrity can guide you toward a brighter path. The road ahead would bring new challenges, but I was ready to meet them head-on, armed with the knowledge that my worth was defined not by others but by myself. The journey from betrayal to empowerment is never a straight path. Looking back on everything that happened between Jake and me, the jealousy, the sabotage, the heartbreak, I realize now how much I've grown, not just as a professional but as a person. I learned to trust myself again, to stand firm when my ambitions were questioned, and to seek support when facing challenges that felt overwhelming. There's a strange kind of strength that comes from surviving a storm you never expected. I used to believe that success was a solitary pursuit, that I had to carry every burden alone. But this experience taught me something far more valuable. Resilience is nurtured through connection, through the unexpected allies who show up when you need them most. Claire Reynolds, my company's HR director, was one of those allies. Her belief in me, her willingness to fight alongside me, reminded me that I didn't have to face adversity in silence. Trusting myself was another lesson etched deep into my journey. When Jake's actions first surfaced, I doubted my instincts, wondering if I was overreacting or seeing shadows where there were none. But digging deeper, gathering proof, and confronting reality showed me the importance of listening to my own voice. It was a process of reclaiming authority over my story, refusing to be gaslit or silenced. I also learned the hard truth about relationships and ambition. It's easy to romanticize partnership, to assume that love means unconditional support. But sometimes, love becomes tangled with insecurity and fear, and that complicates everything. I realized that true partnership requires celebrating each other's growth, not feeling threatened by it. This insight reshaped how I view not only past relationships, but the ones I will build in the future. Facing sabotage and betrayal forced me to redefine my boundaries. I understood the critical importance of protecting my professional space and my emotional well-being. It wasn't selfish to set limits. It was necessary for survival and growth. This shift in perspective gave me the courage to make hard decisions, including stepping away from a marriage that no longer served me. The empowerment I found was not just about overcoming Jake's interference. It was about embracing my full potential without apology. I discovered that setbacks, even painful ones, can be catalysts for transformation. Each challenge became a stepping stone, pushing me toward a clearer sense of who I am and what I want. Throughout this journey, I became an advocate, not just for myself, but for others facing similar struggles. Sharing my story with colleagues and friends opened conversations about ambition, jealousy, and the complexities women often face in the workplace. I realized that vulnerability could be a source of strength, and that by speaking out, I could help dismantle the stigma around these issues. The experience also deepened my appreciation for resilience as a form of quiet rebellion. In a world that sometimes seems quick to diminish women's achievements, standing firm and refusing to be undermined is an act of courage. It's a reminder that our worth is not dictated by others, but by our own conviction and integrity. While the road ahead remains uncertain, I face it with a renewed sense of confidence and clarity. I know now that setbacks do not define me. How I respond to them does. I am ready to embrace new opportunities, build healthier relationships, and continue growing both personally and professionally. This journey taught me that resilience is born from adversity, that empowerment comes from within, and that even in the darkest moments, there is a path forward. I am no longer afraid to walk it, because I have learned that the strength to overcome lies not in avoiding pain, but in facing it head-on and emerging stronger on the other side. My story is not just about surviving sabotage or ending a marriage. It's about reclaiming my life and my dignity. It's a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of allies, and the unshakable belief that I am worthy of success and happiness. And in that belief, I have found my freedom.